All right. Welcome to another episode of the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. I am Chris Hinkle. I am your Blunt Force Conservative. I'm a retired FBI supervisory special agent, spent over 20 years in the FBI, spent another 5 years with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and I had a total of 33 years of government service. So retirement's pretty good. Get that nice forever check every month. My heart goes out to those going through the shutdown right now, the longest one in history. The one prior to that, I went through in 2019, and it's strenuous. It gets frustrating, but even with the 35 days that we had before, at least at the agency that I worked for at the FBI, I didn't hear anybody complaining about it. Everybody just kind of did their work and moved forward. So I'm sure that that's happening right now. I haven't heard from anybody inside the FBI that is complaining about that. A couple of quick things to hit before we get into the topic of today's podcast. Topics of today's podcast. I'm seeing that we're still waiting on the identification of the J6 pipe bomber. We've got people out there speculating that, oh, I'm this investigative reporter and I know who it is. Well, just tell us. You're not bound by any, investigative secrecy. Tell us who it is. Uh, it is interesting. I'm looking at Rasmussen reports, and I was just texting my good friend Mark Mitchell, honest pollster, who is the pollster for Rasmussen reports, and was asking him who actually puts out he puts his podcast in his X account out at Honest Pollster with Rasmussen reports, and then there's the Rasmussen reports uh, X page, and that's done by his boss. So I can see his boss is a little frustrated right now because some guy named Steve Baker that's at actually I know who Steve Baker is. Steve Baker, that's I guess he's associated with Blaze TV or loosely associated with him, or he's on the payroll at Blaze TV. But he's out there teasing. And what you end up finding from a lot of these people is that they tease because they want to increase enthusiasm and engagement and those types of things. I don't know if he's if he's monetized on X or anything like that, but that's typically what happens with a lot of these grifters that are out there. I don't know if Steve's a grifter or not. I really don't know him. I know who he is. We've crossed paths, I think, a couple of times out there. He's taken some positions that I kind of disagree with. But that's a topic for another podcast and another day. Um, Speaking of which, I do want to find out from people out there in my circle. Now, I don't have a ton of followers, but it's growing every day, and we tend to do reasonably well with the podcast. We had a great podcast on Saturday where we did only sports, and you got to see behind the curtain and see Chris Allen, my brother-in-law, who produces this show, and you got to meet my brother, my baby brother Kevin, and we talked nothing but sports, no politics. So I'm going to try to get into a little more, I don't know, consistency with this podcast. I'm pretty busy right now. Uh, the contract work that I do for a company doing background investigations, it's a little bit sparse right now because of the shutdown. Not a problem. I've got plenty of work in my private business. I have an investigative services business. I'm not your typical PI that goes out and sit in the car and try to tell if your spouse is cheating on you. The rates that I charge per hour, you can find somebody else that can do that for about a third of what I charge. I do some surveillance, but it is very selective, and it's for some very select clients. And it's usually for something pretty big that they need my background training and experience in that area. So we're seeing this thing with the J6 pipe bomber. I'm not getting spun up over it. I've had some private conversations with fellow retirees, and we just look at it as, if you know who it is, tell us who it is, unless you're bound by some non-disclosure agreement, which I wouldn't think that Steve Baker would be bound by that. But don't tease out there. Especially if you tease and you say you're going to say something and then you don't. And I see that from a number of individuals out there. I just kind of ignore them. It impugns their credibility. So today, what we wanted to talk about, the first thing, there's been a lot of hubbub about the use of the FBI plane. And I want to dispel some things about that just based on my actual knowledge and experience from over 20 years in the FBI, knowing people that work in the aviation unit. I actually supervised our use of a plane that we had down in Jackson, Mississippi for a while. So I kind of know the ins and outs of that. And I know that, you kind of you have to keep those things confidential for what you're using those planes for. And that's gonna play into what I'm going to talk about here. So the FBI has this Gulfstream G5 aircraft, and it's more closely associated with use by the director of the FBI. Traveling around, traveling overseas. It's set up so that it's much easier for his protective service detail to have everything prepared and ready to go. He is mandated to have a protective service team. That was something that changed after 9/11. When I came into the FBI, Louis Freeh was the director of the FBI, and he was a former agent, and he chose to be his own protective detail. And I understand that there are times when maybe another agent would travel around with him. He typically flew commercial. He did use the FBI aircraft from time to time, but because the director of the FBI has specific times, dates, locations that he has to hit, he does need to use that plane because he can't subject himself to delays from aircraft at airports. He needs to be able to get where he's supposed to get. And the other thing that I don't hear these people that talk like they're the experts. There's a couple of there's at least one guy out there barely had a cup of coffee in the FBI, but he seems to be touted as this FBI expert and this FBI whistleblower. I usually don't mention people's names here on the podcast. I don't want to try to elevate them. I don't want to try to give them any oxygen that they crave for attention. But this guy, Kyle Seraphin, he's not a whistleblower. He's not. And I've responded to that a couple of times online where I've just said, not a whistleblower. And he is not. That is not why he was terminated and separated from the FBI or suspended. It was for unprofessional conduct. He even admits as such. He actually played a tape of the female agent that was interviewing him as part of his Office of Professional Responsibility investigation, where he got sideways with some of his coworkers and with a school resource officer in engaging in unprofessional conduct. What tends to happen is what I've seen is a number of these people get jammed up inside the FBI, and then they want to claim to be some type of whistleblower, and that just doesn't work out well for you. If you noticed when the testimony before Congress, Mr. Seraphin wasn't invited to testify before Congress, and that's very telling because the bar is not set very high to have somebody that comes in that allegedly is a whistleblower. So when you want to know things about the FBI, why not ask people that have been there and done that? And as we say, got multiple T-shirts. And he's just not one of those. I think he had less than 6 years in the FBI. Trust me, that is not enough time to figure things out and to learn things about the way that the FBI works. When you come in, unless you've got some veterans preference, your probationary period is 2 years. And you're going to spend the first 16 weeks at the FBI Academy. So that takes that out. Then you got travel, getting to your new location. If you're being located somewhere other than you're already living, then you get settled in there. There's usually some holidays or some acclimation to the office. It's a lot. And it's very hard in that first year to even have an understanding of the FBI, much less 2 years, which most people that come into the FBI have a probationary period of 2 years. You probably have demonstrated the mechanics of how to do the job. And that's part of your probationary package. You'll have an agent that's assigned to kind of oversee your probationary package. It's usually an agent that's got some seniority that helps you out with that. It's because they know people. So if you're short on getting your surveillance time in, they know who to talk to over the surveillance operations unit, or the surveillance people that are in the office. If you are lacking on, let's say, testifying in court, and that's something I want to talk about at one time, about when you end up testifying in court. I rarely had to testify in court, and there's a reason for that. And we're going to talk about it on another podcast. But let's get back to this G5. So he's trying to give some type of expertise because he was banished out to the surveillance squad in Washington field office. Now, I use that term banished for a reason. I was at Washington field office. I got there in the late 90s and stayed there until I went to FBI headquarters, 2004, and spent 2 years at headquarters. And then I went down to Jackson, Mississippi. I was promoted to a field desk down there. I competed against 7 other people for a position on a desk that was multifaceted. It had every program you could think of at that time. And it was a lot to manage. I had anywhere from 10 to 15 agents, depending on what time period you're talking about, that I directly supervised. I had 2 task forces. I had 2 support employees. Well, actually 3 support employees that I wrote their performance appraisals. I signed their leave slips, managed their day. So I had a good understanding of the way the FBI works. I benefited from being at Washington Field, but one of the things at Washington Field that was affectionately known, or affectionate term that we used for the surveillance squad. Now, when I was at Washington Field, we didn't have there weren't 2 tiers of surveillance. You had at that time SOG, the Surveillance Operations Group. And now you have a surveillance operations group, and then you have an SSG, which is non-agents, support staff that go out and do surveillance. That's their entire job. Back then, we only had the SOG that was at Washington Field. Now there's 2 portions of the SOG. You had the aviation side. We had helicopter, aircraft that we could fly. If we were going to do, traffic stops, or we needed to track somebody, from the air and watch what they were doing. And we had that in Jackson, Mississippi too. We actually had a plane there, and I supervised, as I mentioned earlier. But the use of this G5 and the director, so it's used for more than just the director. I'm not even sure the director has the priority of using it, depending on what the circumstances are. The director, after 9/11, and I think really they mandated it primarily beginning in 2011, that the director shall use this aircraft for all travel. If he's going to go home to visit family, if he has to go for a personal visit or something like that, it's actually less costly to use the G5. And with the protective detail that he's mandated to have, it's less expensive to do that than to try to secure commercial travel. You can't expect the director to travel by train. You're not going to convoy from Washington, D.C. to wherever he needs to go. So in the full scope of what the director is responsible for, there's going to be some personal travel there. Now, this individual, Seraphin, seems to try to indicate or insinuate that all of these trips that the director's doing, he's just doing it to party and go different places. The director has responsibilities in visiting legal attaché offices that are in foreign countries, to go to certain field offices. I remember when Chris Wray came on as the director, one of the things that he said, my goal as the director is to visit all then 56 field offices. There's 55 now, I believe. So he's mandated to use that. Now, who mandates that he use that? Is it mandated according to law? Not necessarily. It is available to him, and there are rules and regulations by it, and it's monitored through GSA, the General Services Administration. But the president actually designates whether or not the director of the FBI is going to use that for all travel. So if you're going to be mad at somebody, if you're going to call somebody out, why don't you contact the White House and lobby them to restrict the director of the FBI's movements or the attorney general's movements. The attorney general is mandated to fly via government aircraft as well. Now, if the director uses it for some personal business, if he's going to go visit family, significant other, if he has to go back and check on his home property, he has to reimburse at the commercial rate the cost of that travel. Now, you can't expect the director of the FBI, who really doesn't make much more than a lot of the FBI agents that are out on the street, that are out there working. There is a limitation on the amount of money that you can make as an FBI agent. And the director is an FBI agent. Dan Bongino is an FBI agent. Andrew Bailey's an FBI agent. The director is an FBI agent. They have a badge, their credentials. They are allowed to have a gun. They can get issued a gun. They have arrest powers. They are agents. So when they're using this aircraft, it's just much, it's less costly. Even you can't expect the director to pay $10,000 to $50,000, whatever the actual financial cost of the travel of the team that goes along with them, paying their lodging, their per diem, his travel. You can't expect the director of the FBI to foot that bill every time he wants to go visit his house. So when you see individuals that have consistently been wrong on things, embellishing and trying to draw unnecessary attention, and I've seen other podcasters pick up on it as well. Now, I'm not going to name them, but when I see them, standing in front of their camera, looking like they were caught off guard. They're not dressed professionally. They don't speak professionally. They act like they've got some super secret sources inside the FBI to tell them all this information. Maybe they do. Likely they don't. I just don't put a lot of stock in it. So anyway, I talked to you about the director using that G5. The attorney general can use it, and there are other portions of the FBI that can use it. How do I know that? Because when I was at FBI headquarters in the early 2000s, we used the director's plane routinely. The reason we used it, what we would do, we had some operations when I was working at an offsite portion of cyber division, and we would need to use the plane to fly without drawing unnecessary attention, as I like to say, having worked in the undercover world. I was an undercover coordinator and I was a certified online covert employee. One of the first series when that first became a thing, the online covert employee, I was one of the first ones. We would use that plane to go to places, and we would have to do things that were in support of some investigations or programs that we didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to. So when we would fly, often that plane couldn't be tracked. There would be other things to deviate from, attention away from that aircraft. Even down here in Mississippi, when we would do surveillance using the plane here, there were very few people that knew that plane was in the air or what it was doing. You likely, depending on the operation that we had, if you saw the plane fly over your house and you tried to track it via some of these online sites, you probably wouldn't see anything, or you would see something that would draw attention away from it. And there's a reason for that, because of the sensitivity of the operations that you're engaged in. So when you hear these individuals like this guy that I mentioned earlier, and some of these others trying to grift off of it, and it's pretty much a grift operation, you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. Take a look, stand back and take a look at why they're doing it. What would be the purpose in doing it? The director is going to fly on that plane. Now, what Mr. Serafin will tell you is that, he's not mandated by law to use the plane. He could say, I'm just not going to use the plane. And he lobbied before he came into the FBI to not use the plane. Yeah. He had no understanding of the responsibilities, the parameters, the things that those planes are used for. And the director is under a constant threat. That's why he has a protective service detail. So you may not want to always know that the director of the FBI is in the air or the attorney general is in the air. Now, they likely will keep that make it a lot more difficult for people to understand that. But these individuals that say that they're getting leaks from inside the FBI to tell them what the director is going to do, better be very careful about that. And if anybody inside the FBI is leaking out, let me tell you, you end up using that Bu phone. They're going to know you use that Bu phone, who you talked to, what calls you made. They're going to track everything and where it went. And if you don't think they can get the opportunity to track your personal phone, just keep thinking that. So, as I said, if you want to point the finger at somebody for the use of the plane or what you think is misuse, because the director has this availability to him to use his plane, point it at the White House. They obviously are comfortable with him using it in the fashion that he's used it because they haven't had a problem with it. So I think you need to put that stuff to rest out there. Now, the plane, and like I said, the oversight, GSA looks over it. If Congress really wants to know, they have a constitutional right to oversight. They could call the director in. But if you noticed, you're not seeing even Democrats screaming and yelling about, calling Kash Patel into a committee hearing so they can engage in theater and call into question his use of the FBI plane. It should be very easy for him to explain, hey, I'm mandated to use it. Who mandates it? The White House, the president has told me that I'll use it, has told the attorney general that she will fly in this fashion. The president will also make those determinations if others need protective service details. I'll give you an example of that. John Bolton wasn't a member of the government the last time that I saw him, because we shared a flight from DC. Well, actually, from Jackson, Mississippi up to Washington, D.C. I was getting ready to get on the flight, and John Bolton was there. Saw him in person, and he had a protective service detail. And that detail was paid for by the government because there were threats to his life from foreign adversaries. Credible threats is what it was determined. So a protective service detail was assigned to him, and the taxpayers paid for that. And that's kind of the way it is. Pompeo, if you remember, when initially he had a protective service detail, I think President Trump removed that. So anyway, that's pretty much all I got to say on this plane thing. I think it's a red herring. I think it's dumb for people, especially, people that are trying to make hay out of this, make it into more than it is. Now, I've had my critiques of Kash Patel. I got to tell you, I'm not a big fan of seeing him in an FBI raid jacket when he's out speaking. And I'm not a big fan of the, multiple appearances on Fox News. I'm more of a, hey, just do the things you need to do professionally. People respect you more for that. You're going to get more respect from the rank and file inside the FBI wearing a suit and speaking on their behalf behind a podium and being professional about it. I thought that Chris Wray and Jim Comey were unprofessional. Comey, seriously unprofessional. I think we found out how unprofessional he is, especially in his private life. Chris Wray's been pretty quiet, but I used to get frustrated with Chris Wray when he would testify before Congress, and he would immediately cloak himself in the good reputation of the men and women of the FBI, so that if you tried to question anything that he was saying, he would try to make it look like you're questioning the integrity of these street agents, the rank and file in the FBI, and that's not the case. We had some problems in the FBI. I've had this argument with people before. I brought some people over to my side. My good friends Ada Nestor and Gary Heasley of the Conservative Voice and WWDB out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They were all about this, tear down the FBI. Nobody can be trusted. It's culture rot and all of that. And I brought them over to my side just by providing them information. So real quick, another thing that I want to hit on here is, and I'm not seeing as much of it now, but it keeps popping up, and that is disband the FBI. You've got a lot of people that think that the entire FBI is corrupt. It's not. It is not. I'll take that debate with anyone. And give them my handle. Hey, you DM me and I verify who they are. I'll give them my cell phone number and then give me a call. It's not. We had some bad actors at the very high portions of the FBI that were directing things in nefarious ways. Comey, Strzok, Kleinsmith, Page. If you want to go up to DOJ, Monaco, Garland, you've got all of those individuals that were doing some nefarious things. And it frustrates me when I hear people say things like, well, let's just disband the FBI, or any agent that worked on any investigation, that agent needs to be, fired, kicked out of the FBI. That's one of the dumbest things that I've ever heard. And I called that out online. You can go back and look. Tom Fenton was talking about the FBI needs to be shut down. And I just said it for exactly what it is. It's the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. This guy's supposed to be a smart guy, knowledgeable of the Constitution, knowledgeable about how government works and all of this. And he calls for something stupid like that. And yes, I would say that directly to Tom Fenton. I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings. I'm not the passive force conservative. I'm the blunt force conservative. I'm gonna tell you exactly like it is. So when these people say things like that, and I confront them on it, I say, okay, you're going to get rid of the FBI. Who's going to fill the role? You shut it down tomorrow. Who fills the role? So let's look at some of the things that the FBI solely is responsible for, with its 13, 14, 15,000 agents. That would be any investigations involving all acts of terrorism affecting the U.S. They are the sole lead agency of the Attorney General guideline under the Attorney General's guidelines for domestic FBI operations. Espionage and foreign counterintelligence investigations. They're the top agency. If it's spying, sabotage, foreign agent registration, FARA violations in the U.S. Now the CIA handles overseas human intelligence, but the FBI has exclusive domestic authority. That's why we got a problem with John Brennan if the FBI were doing things on U.S. soil. That's a violation of law, violation of our civil liberties. Public corruption involving federal officials, exclusive jurisdiction of the FBI. Civil rights violations under color of law. Who's going to take that on? There is no other agency out there when you have law enforcement officers, whether at the federal, state, or local level, that if they abuse their authority and infringe upon your liberties, the FBI has sole jurisdiction on that. I know. I supervised that. That was part of one of the programs that I supervised, the civil rights program down here in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, the DOJ Civil Rights Division prosecutes it. FBI investigates it exclusively. Other things, organized crime, non-drug specific. There's some carve-outs here where you have the DEA that works some drug-related crimes. There's nothing that the DEA works that the FBI can't work. It's just like there's nothing that Immigrations and Customs Enforcement or Homeland Security works that the FBI can't work. There's no sole jurisdiction there. There's carve-outs, and they're given primary jurisdiction. But I used to tell people, as an FBI agent, my jurisdiction is the United States of America and its territories, and any violations of the Constitution or U.S. Code, period. So you've got RICO violations. Now the FBI, handles RICO and the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Forces. We had a OCDF is what they call it. We had an OCDF on my squad that we managed. Cybercrime targeting of critical infrastructure or federal systems. In other words, hacking of federal networks, financial systems, or critical infrastructures. Unless it's something dealing with the Department of Defense, and you may have DHS taking the lead on that. But the FBI still has some jurisdiction there. They're just not the primary, maybe the primary. They have the primary authority on their Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. That's FBI. Crimes on federal lands. There are individuals out there. There's some crimes that we don't investigate as FBI agents in the normally, that we do investigate on federal lands, like Indian reservations. Usually it's called CGR, crimes on government reservations. Could occur in a prison as well, government reservation. Murders, kidnappings, assaults, federal property, those things, or if they involve federal officers. Sole jurisdiction on military bases, unless we have some type of agreement with one of the military investigative agencies. I worked a number of cases as an Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent with the FBI. As a matter of fact, that's how I ended up getting recruited for the FBI in the 90s. I actually started in the early 90s working with a couple of FBI agents out of Pierre, South Dakota, when I was based at Ellsworth Air Force Base as an OSI agent. Interstate fugitive and kidnapping cases, UFAP, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrants. Um, we handle all of that. Bank robberies and financial institution crimes. Now, that did change under Mueller and was accelerated under Comey and under Wray, where we kind of just grabbed data off of bank robberies. When I first got down to Jackson, Mississippi, we pretty much handled all of them. We got a call as soon as any bank in the state of Mississippi was robbed, especially the ones where we had serial bank robbers. We had a serial bank robber case that we worked here in Mississippi. Threats against the president or federal protectees. All credible threats against the president, VP, or Secret Service protectees, sole investigative authority. You would think that that might be the U.S. Secret Service. It is not. That was the problem I had with the Butler, Pennsylvania shooting, the assassination attempt of President Trump. Chris Wray dropped the ball on that. He should be hauled back into Congress. He should be hauled back to answer for his ineptitude involving that case. I said, as soon as it happened, I said, this needs to be under the sole jurisdiction of the FBI. The FBI needs to be the sole authority managing this thing. You can have everybody play a role, but everything needs to funnel to and direction needs to be given from the FBI in investigating that. According to the law, that's the way it's supposed to be. There's a whole statute of this. Let's see. I wrote this down earlier in some research. 18 USC 871, sole investigative authority on threats against the president or federal protectees. That now typically you'll see the Secret Service go out and gather some initial information. It's a credible threat. That case is going to be worked by the FBI. Now, the other thing, we just had this election up in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York. That's primarily, well, I mean, you had the initiative out in California where they're basically going to do away with the Republican Party in that state, or not even give it a foothold to ever come, take precedence there. But I don't really care as much about that. I think that it's going to take some time and some pain for the people in New York. Margaret Thatcher had a great phrase that she coined, which is socialism is great until you run out of other people's money. I think if Mamdani is going to push forward the things that he plans on doing, and there's no recourse, there's no one there. The president of the United States can only do so much. If you've got the city council, the supervisors, you got everybody on board, and you got the state senators and state, House and the governor all on board, there's really not much you can do to stop the things that he's going to try to do. Even though a lot of those things are probably unconstitutional, illegal, he's just going to go ahead and do them, and you're going to have to deal with it afterward. But what you're going to find is people are probably going to move out of there. Now, what would be very telling and detrimental to the city of New York is if the New York Stock Exchange moved. And I see some people throwing some trial balloons out there about it moving to Miami or Dallas or someplace like that. With this electronic age, there's no real reason for it to be in New York. And there's a lot of major businesses that the only reason that they're in New York, that they're down on Wall Street, is because that's where the exchange is. That's the only reason that they have their headquarters and such there. And you have a lot of people moving out. To tell you how difficult it is in New York, I remember Rush Limbaugh talking about he was still getting audited after he had been gone from New York for almost 20 years. They were looking at any time he made a trip there, did he make any kind of money? They were looking for any way they could to get a foothold into his tax dollars. That's ridiculous. Now, what the president can do is, if we have some Congress that has some intestinal fortitude, we'll use that instead of a more colorful phrase, is, these SALT things, state and local taxes, of them being able to use that as a deduction off of their federal taxes. What it means is your federal dollars end up supplementing the state tax problems in California and New York. That terrifies them when you get rid of SALT, the state and local tax exemption. That makes it pretty rough, because then it highlights what those local legislatures are doing to take money out of your pocket. Now, that brings me to, what do the Republicans want and what do you want? I had this conversation the other day. Actually, I had a conversation with Chris Salcedo on his show. I think it was yesterday. No, it was yesterday. Today's Thursday. So yeah, it was yesterday. So I texted him and said, hey, I got some thoughts on this, who's actually at fault for this accelerating cost in healthcare. That's basically, the Affordable Care Act, where it forced, the government was going to subsidize the health industry. And the phrase is correct. There's nothing that the federal government regulates nor subsidizes. It doesn't get more expensive and less available, just nothing. And the problem we have is, and the reason that the Democrats are so scared, is they want those subsidies to continue because they have a large donor base from a lot of these people in the healthcare industry. And that's scary to them that could go away. I think that the more than likely past performance is not always indicative of future behavior, but it usually is when it's with the Republicans. I think they'll cave at some portion of this and say that they didn't. We've seen it too many times with John Cornyn, acquiescing on our Second Amendment rights. You even had who's the senator from out in California, Southern California, not Lindsey Graham, the other senator that's out there, that he tried to go out and put forth, champion some legislation that would have infringed on your Second Amendment rights. I even have some problems with Pam Bondi as the Attorney General, because she was trying to push red flag laws, which are wholly unconstitutional. I can debate her all day long on that. She will lose on that aspect. We'll have that for another day on a podcast when I start talking about Second Amendment rights. But what do the Republicans want? I've never seen a party work so hard to regain the minority. I think they're playing this waiting game. We've got one year since the election happened, with Trump getting reelected. Of course, January 20th will be 1 year that he's been back in office. Man, it's going by fast. But what I see is them really not doing much. Do a little experiment. And you can do this on Grok. You can do it on ChatGPT. You can do it just a regular Google search. Search for all of how many of President Trump's executive orders, and we have to say that he's been very successful with those, in dealing with the border, dealing with DEI and critical race theory, moving, USAID, dealing with that. He's been really good with his executive orders. But how many of those have been codified into law by the Republican Party? Zero. It's influenced some policies and some legislation, but it definitely has not been codified. So when you see John Thune out there acting up and yelling and screaming in the well of the Senate, what are you going to do? I can tell you, I don't understand why the Republicans can't understand this. If you want to follow somebody that has some pretty good ideas of what the Republican Party should do, if they want to grow their party, go to Mark Mitchell at Honest Pollster on X and take a look. He does the polling out there, and he knows what people want, and they want those executive orders codified. They want to keep more money in their pocket. They want less regulation. These are all things that we want. And if they would just come out with some type of contract, a checklist that people can look at, and issue item things can be voted on. It's similar to when we talk about these issue items, this omnibus bill thing and these continuing resolutions, which are unconstitutional. You can't just keep continuing over and over and extending. And they always seem to wait to cause a crisis toward the end of the fiscal year. Really, what they need to do are single issues. I confronted my congressman, Michael Guest, I think he's a good guy, personally. I think he's a horrible politician. But I did just see him at lunch yesterday. He came up, shook my hand. We're civil and cordial with each other. Man, I can't point to anything substantively that he's done. But I confronted him on, you told me that you're pro-life, but you voted for the omnibus bill that funded Planned Parenthood. Now, if there's one thing, if tomorrow I was elected as a congressman here in Mississippi, or if I was appointed as a senator or elected as a senator, if there's one thing that would be a poison pill in any bill that you put before me, and that would be to fund abortion. If it offsets the cost, money is fungible. They can't say that, you're giving it to Planned Parenthood and they're only doing things that are non-abortion related. Well, that frees up money for other places. And you want to really make your representative head spin, start saying, is money fungible or is it not? If I give you money to pay for your groceries, you're asking me for money to pay your power bill, but I give you money to pay for your groceries. Doesn't that free up money to pay your power bill? So it's fungible. They'll have a difficult time answering that. Much like most of the politicians, that when I ask them civil and cogent questions, they have a difficult time with it. Not trying to be hateful and mean. I think one of the biggest surprises that I've had as I've reached into my 60s now, my early 60s, is, we don't have a lot of smart people in politics. I think that, it's time that we did have some smart people there, some people that actually stood on the Constitution, not these faux Constitution conservatives like Thomas Massie or Rand Paul. They're not. They are narcissistic. They have egos, and they're feeding those egos. And a lot of the things they talk about are in violation of the Constitution. With Rand Paul, tariffs are not taxes. Tariffs are a foreign policy tool that is allowed to be used by the president in working with, in negotiating policy with foreign nations. It just is ridiculous, the things that he says. Thomas Massie on the Epstein client list, releasing that. There's some bad people that, on this quote list. I don't think there's just a specific list. I think there's probably some names that may be known or suspected. But here's the problem. We have a due process under our constitutional rights. You can't just go out there and release names and have people have to prove their innocence. Our justice system doesn't work that way. I'm consistent on that. And I've called out Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene for them pushing, I know the names. All right, say the names and get your butt sued. Because if I was on that list, if I had a legitimate business reason to be at Epstein Island and I had nothing to do with anything that went on inside that house, I just was down there for a meeting and flew back, but my name was released down on that list and people started, imputing my character or defaming me by saying that I was guilty of something, you're going to get sued. You'll have lawyers that will line up to sue you. And that's why you don't see Rand Paul or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Thomas Massie releasing that. What he wants is the House to take responsibility of it. If you got the name, release it, buddy. I'll put the challenge down to you. Otherwise, shut up. Quit trying to infringe upon people's constitutional rights. And I'm not trying to protect anybody from the Epstein list. There's some terrible people that had some interactions with Epstein. Do I think they're pedophiles? I don't. It's unlikely. I haven't seen anything to indicate that there were any prepubescent children that were there. But that shows you how much intelligence that Thomas Massie lacks if he uses the term pedophiles involved in that. I don't even think he knows what it means. And it's high time that our representatives adhere and represent the number one priority that they have, and that's enforcing the Constitution. The Constitution is there to protect us from government. If there's one question I would love for you to ask your representative, as someone who I consider myself a scholar of the Constitution, not an attorney, I'm not a professor on it. I haven't lost a debate to an attorney or a professor on the Constitution. I'm pretty passionate about it. Most law schools, I've talked to people in law school down here, they lightly touch on the Constitution, which is scary considering it's the foundation for all of our laws. Um, but ask them this question: what is your number one responsibility as a congressman, as a representative? And if they don't tell you that it's to protect and defend, support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, which means protecting the citizens from government. If they don't tell you that, then you need to remind them of that. And then when you tell them, hey, this is your number one responsibility, it's literally the one thing that you swear an oath to do. Everything else is secondary to that. Then ask them a follow-up question. Can you tell me of a time that you observed the government infringing upon the liberties of the citizen? What actions did you take, and what were the results of those actions? Those two questions I asked of Michael Guest, and his mouth went agape. He could not answer it. And I heard from people on his staff, people that are friends of mine that are on his staff, that really, really troubled him more than his vote to fund Planned Parenthood, that he couldn't answer that question. Now, I don't know, maybe that'll shift him into the right direction. I was pushed really hard by a lot of people, some influential people, trying to get me to run for office down here and actually run against Michael Guest for Congress. And I think God had a different plan at this time. We just had our first grandchild, a granddaughter. She was born a little over 6 weeks ago. And I don't want to spend my time out doing the things I need to do to run for office to try to unseat Michael Guest. Right now, I want to spend that time. You can't get that time back. So once you miss that, you miss it. And I want to be here for those first couple of years. Doesn't mean that I won't consider running in 2028. We'll see. Maybe Michael Guest does 180, turns around, he turns out to be the best at protecting our liberties, using the power of the purse. I don't think that the Republicans are like any other political party. Once they get a taste of that money, your money, because the government doesn't have its own money. It has money that it confiscates from you through taxes or penalties or fees. Similar to you own your house. You don't own your house. You never own your house. My dad they paid off the house years and years and years ago. And every year he has to pay to the state for his house. So the state actually owns it. If he doesn't pay those taxes, they can take his house. You don't own your own property. That's got to change too. That's something that's got to be fixed. I hope Florida pushes that. I heard Ron DeSantis is pushing that. That really needs to stop. This incessant taxing of your property. If you're paying all this money over 360 payments or more, and paying a mortgage on your house, you should be able to own your property. It should be yours. The government shouldn't have any say so whatsoever. So what can you do about it? You can become more educated on the Constitution. You can teach your children about the Constitution, because civics clearly isn't being taught in the high schools. I've offered to come give some lectures and seminars on the Constitution at our local high school. And of course, a lot of the teachers there, especially the ones that teach some of the government classes, I think they're a little intimidated because there are those that do, and there are those that can't do but teach. I'll give you one last example before we get ready to close this out. I was approached by one of the community colleges, junior colleges here in Mississippi. We have a ton of junior colleges. It's a great avenue for students. I would highly recommend going to a junior college rather than going to a four-year university. Unless you're getting a full ride at that four-year university, you can, depending on your ACT score, can get into a good junior college at no cost to you. And if you bust your butt and make straight A's there, like my two oldest sons did, you get a Phi Theta Kappa scholarship, and that pays for the next 2 years of your college career. They were able to do that. It's a great avenue. If you're into sports, two of our children, our middle son and youngest son, both played college soccer at the junior college level, and they were able to have their education paid for based on their athletic endeavors. You're probably not going to get that at a four-year university. You're probably not going to play much at a four-year university. Our middle son and youngest son were really adept and skilled at soccer, highly recruited, not just by two-year universities, by four-year universities. But if they'd gone to a four-year university, we would have had to pay for them to go, and they likely would have ridden the bench the first year, probably 2 years that they were at that four-year institution. You go to a junior college, you're playing right away as a freshman. You're not sitting on the bench. I can tell you. And then if you can get that Phi Theta Kappa scholarship and you're an athlete, you can market yourself to four-year universities where you show up as a junior with, you've already got a good track record in school, so they're not going to have to worry about your grades, and you're going to have a stack of money in your pocket that you're bringing to pay for your education. They really love that. So let's take a quick look here online and see if there's anything popping up in the news that I should comment on. I like to do this every now and then just to kind of riff, as I call it. Oh, goodness. We've got, I have to put my glasses on here. I hate it when someone only likes me for my tracking skills. So yeah, Kyle Serafin's out there still talking the plain stuff. He's doing everything he can to grift. He's got to get those engagement numbers up. I've got a friend of mine here. He's a radio show host. Follow him too. He is awesome. He's the #1 radio show host in the state of morning radio show host in the state of Mississippi, and here at WYAB, and that's Clay Edwards. He's at Save Jackson, SAVEJXN. You tune in on his show. He's a good old country boy. He is very smart for a guy that barely eked out of high school, from my understanding. But go follow Clay. Clay has about 7,000 followers, and he's monetized. And little Kyle here, 220,000 followers, and he can't get monetized. That's because the engagement's not there. That means the thing that you're trying to market yourself for is not bringing eyes and ears and comments and things to what you do. So I think that's kind of interesting. So got a big weekend coming up. This Saturday, my Alabama Crimson Tide are hosting the LSU Tigers, and they will be playing in Tuscaloosa. Of course, LSU is playing with an interim coach since Brian Kelly got fired. I think Alabama should win. They should win this. I can't believe the wheels would fall off. At this point, they seem to be pretty focused. I've been impressed. Always apprehensive. But we have a tradition here. There's two traditions with Alabama football. First is when Alabama plays Tennessee, and that's what happened a couple of weeks back. Third Saturday in October, as we call it. And the winner of that game smokes a cigar. And of course, I and my oldest son lit some cigars after Alabama won that game. The tradition that we have here, and it's a phrase that's used, is LSU fans smell like corn dogs. So I went and bought I went to Sam's and bought a box of like 30 or 40 corn dogs. So I'll be cooking those up and ready to serve those at the end of the game. And there will be a picture of me and my son. I'll post it here on X. You'll see me and my oldest son here. The one that he and his lovely wife, Sarah Grace, brought us our first grandchild. But we'll be posing with our corn dogs at the end of that game. So it's going to be fun. Thanks again for listening in. I try to keep these things pretty basic. I don't like when I'm not a big fan of the people that get out there and they just pop things up on the screen and draw, attention away. Tell me what you think. You don't have to justify it. If you're knowledgeable and experienced in something, it's easy to just talk about it off the cuff. I just had a couple of notes here that I was looking over. I don't really have a script or anything. I've had people accuse me of having a script when I talk about the Constitution. I don't. I'm just passionate about it. And I try to tie everything back to that. It's why I try to model myself in like Justice Scalia. The Constitution says what it says, nothing else. Otherwise, 5 hotshot attorneys, and I hate that they use this attorneys, sitting on the Supreme Court would run the country. not requirement to be an attorney or a judge to be on the Supreme Court. Anybody that's a U.S. citizen can sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. And it may be time. We've had 4 of those in our history that weren't judges or attorneys before sitting on the court. So maybe we need to get back to that. I know some attorneys get mad at me when I say that. My brother-in-law and I have gone back and forth on it. But Ketanji Brown Jackson, she's got that law degree. Doesn't seem to be working out too well for her. So let's root for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I always want to see the good guys win. I hope everybody is starting to get ready for Thanksgiving. We're doing what we can to help out the people that are struggling a little bit coming out of Biden's economy. I don't fault anybody out there that goes to a food bank or anything like that. You just went through 4 years of hell and high prices and high cost under the Biden administration. And it's going to take a little while to restructure that and get the prices back down. All I know is my power bill is less than it was under the Biden administration. It more than doubled during those 4 years. Eggs are cheaper. I just got gas today, $2.41 a gallon at the Sam's down the road. If I were to drive over to Meridian, I can get it for about $2.20 something a gallon. So God has blessed us here. And our best days are ahead. They're still ahead. I believe the best days are ahead for the FBI. And we're going to talk more about that. I'm going to try to bring some of my inner circle in on the podcast to talk about the things that we talk about with the FBI. And hopefully we can bring you around to our thinking that the FBI is not full of culture rot among the agent cadre. There was a lot of that was happening in the support side. There's a lot of good support people. I'm going to have, a Christmas dinner on December 4th with a lot of former, retired support people from the FBI. But a lot of what was coming up was that focus on these support staff. And that's something I've recommended to Kash Patel and his team. You're going to have to de-emphasize that inside the FBI. There's no way that there should be a support individual at the same level as an agent. It's 2 different positions. It is 2 different skill sets. You can't have somebody come in just because they're an analyst and have them running, managing agents that are out there. I can tell you, it's almost impossible to do on the inside of the FBI. The other thing that's scary, and I'll leave you with this, is, with them electing this Muslim, and there's some questions about his citizenship to be the mayor of New York. It's a little over 24 years and a couple of months since 9/11. I was there in DC on 9/11 that Tuesday morning. I responded to the Pentagon. I lost some of my friends, 2 of my best friends that sat next to me in the office, to cancer. I have to get checked every year for cancer based on my exposure. But how quickly even a city like New York that was hit hard has forgotten about it. And here's what's really scary. There are agents inside the FBI right now, because you can be an agent at 23 years old. It's possible, but there are agents inside the FBI that were not born on 9/11. They were born after 9/11, and now they're agents inside the FBI. Whew, man, that's tough. Well, anyway, thank you again for tuning in. I do appreciate you taking the time to stop by here with this quick podcast. I'm going to try to get more regular about this. I got to get my work taken care of first. I've got this stack of papers right here of law firm support cases. I just finished up with some billing. So I got to get caught up on that. Got some honey-do list here, and we got to go out and start looking at Christmas presents, especially for the granddaughter. Thank you again. God bless all of you. Remember, we're coming up on the season celebrating Christ's birth, and there's a reason for that season. If you don't know Jesus as your Savior, please do so, please. That's the one thing that I pray that you do. Aside from anything else, voting, learning about the Constitution, if you don't know Christ as your Savior, please get to know him as your Savior. Your forever time starts now. It starts now with accepting him as your Savior. Thank you again for stopping by. I will see you again next time.